Hey there, today we're going to look at how to use fill inside and fill outside in Creative Studio 7.0. Now fill can be used for a wide variety of different things. We're going to use it to fill behind an applique piece inside of a block. And I'm also going to show you a really cool trick with Draw Arc. So let's go back to the basics. Alrighty, so what we've got here is I have a circle applique right here inside of this red block, and I want to do a fill pattern behind it. Now in the previous episode, we looked at how to put a background pattern in using trim, okay? Now the reason sometimes you'll use trim over fill is because certain patterns like the stipple that we used in the last episode is not really meant for a fill, okay? Now a fill pattern, the best fill pattern that you will possibly buy or find is a pattern that starts either on the outside or the inside and is going to stitch to the inside and stitch back out. Stitch to the inside, stitch back out, stitch to the inside, stitch back out, stitch to the inside, stitch back out, all the way around in a circle. Because what fill does is it stitches up to a boundary that you've got, okay? It will use that boundary as a path to the next piece and stitch back, okay? So like the stipple over here on the left that we used in a previous episode, if it would have been stitching across here, it would have gotten here and it needed to get all the way to the other side. It has to follow all the way to the outside of this, physically stitching, okay, because it has to use a path to connect it back up. And that would have been a lot of overstitching and too many travels, okay? With fill patterns, as long as they're designed properly, they will stitch to the inside and stitch back out, stitch to the inside, stitch back out, and use very little travel room on this piece right here, so there's less overstitching and you won't see as much of it on the back of the quilt, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to be drawing some boundaries, okay? So first thing I want to do is I want to draw an outer boundary around this square, okay? So I'm going to go to Draw Boundary, and I'm going to click my points of my boundary. Now I'm going to be using the fill option of fill inside, okay, and because I'm doing an outer boundary here, I want to make sure this boundary is as accurate as it possibly can be. So I'm actually going to do more than my normal 4 clicks that I do. I'm actually going to do a couple more just to make it as accurate of a boundary as I can. Especially with fills, you want them to be super accurate boundaries. So we're just using that select button and I'm clicking multiple points around this block. And I'm going to follow it all the way down just to make sure that it is a super accurate boundary. And I'll close the drawing and exit the drawing. Okay? So as you can see on the CAD screen, I have got a boundary around the outside here. Okay? Now, with fill, you can use a pattern, and we'll just go ahead and demonstrate on this boundary, and then I'll show you what I mean by it when we get to the circle. And what I want to do is I'm going to show you a couple examples on the screen, and then we'll come back to this physical piece here, okay? So with fill, I've got this heart applique, for instance, on the CAD screen. And with fill, I want to have that pattern that stitches from the outside and then in and then back outside. I will always be looking at Anita Shackelford's patterns. She has some really good fill patterns, like amazing fill patterns. There's some other designers out there that have really good ones, but I've always gravitated towards Anita's patterns for fills especially. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this pattern and I'm just going to kind of show you really quick how fill is going to work both inside and out. So I've got this pattern on the screen, and it's with a boundary, okay? Because remember, you have to have a boundary to do a fill. And I'm going to right click on this pattern and go to fill, and let's just do outside. So with this fill outside, you can see that it has put the pattern around the outside, and it's using the boundary as its travel line to get to its next piece while it's doing its stitching around this piece. So that was a fill outside. Let's do a Control Z and look at a fill inside, okay? Same idea, using that boundary as its path to continue the stitching line. Okay, so that's just your example where you can see fill inside versus fill outside. Okay, let's come back to this quilt group, and here is the boundary that we made earlier. And this is the pattern that we're actually going to use today, the fill wavy. Now, I have that circle applique, and I told you at the beginning I was going to show you a trick with Draw Arc. Okay, so I'm actually going to do Draw Arc. And I'm going to take the head of my machine, since appliques are basically just a series of curves if you really look at them. I'm going to find about the center of this circle, which is right here, and click select. I'm going to find the midway point right about here and click select, and then find the center up here and click select. And as you can see on the screen, I'm basically making that first curve here. So I'm going to do a continuous arc. So the second point right about here, midway right about here. Okay. Next point right about here, midway right about here. Next point right here, and its ending point back where we started. And with draw arcs, a two-step process, so close drawing and exit drawing. Okay. And I'm just going to make sure that I kind of got these as snapped together as I could, and I didn't, which is okay. We can fix that. Let's take that, come in with our start and ends, and snap those pieces together. There we go. Perfect. So we have our circle here. And what we are going to do is now we have the whole pattern, the whole circle selected. And I am actually, since this is a pattern, remember with fills we have to have boundaries. So I have the pattern selected, and I want to combine it first. So combine patterns. And now that's one pattern. I want to convert it to a boundary. So I've got my circle applique and then my outside square. Okay, so both of them are now boundaries. Okay, so I'm going to take this fill pattern and I'm just going to drag and drop it right here. And I want to kind of have this as centered with the applique as I can, regardless of kind of what's going on in that block. I want to center it more with the applique. And then I can kind of stretch it here, say. And I'm going to double click on this to get my orange handles, and I'm going to pull these out from the center just like this, okay? And then what this is going to give me the ability to do is I am going to now use the fill function. And before I use the fill, take a guess on which fill I'm actually going to use. If I want to fill outside of this circle, which one do you think I'm going to use? Now, if you said fill outside, that's incorrect. I'm going to be using fill inside because I want to fill inside between these two boundaries, okay? So I'm going to left click on that, right click, and go to fill inside. And as you can see, it's using both of these boundaries and it's filling it in between these two, okay? So just like that, I've easily put in a fill pattern to go around this applique. And the pattern that I've chosen actually kind of makes it's going to make it look like the circle's kind of like flying out at us, which is kind of cool. So let's go ahead and start quilting that. Pull out my bobbin thread. Hold them taut and press continue. And it's off to the races. So it's going to get right there, use a little bit of that path to come back, use that outside path, and go back out to it. Okay, it's coming up to do its tie-off stitches. I will move the machine out of the way, take a single stitch, come back, cut my threads, and just like that, I have put a fill pattern behind this applique, okay, using fill inside because I had two boundaries. I had this one, and then I had this outer one, okay, and I did fill inside between the two, and it gave this pattern in this applique just a little bit more of a pop on the quilt, okay? And remember, as you saw it stitching on the screen, you saw that it was going in and coming back out, going in and coming back out. Those are the best types of fill patterns. So just like that, super easy to do a fill either inside or outside in Creative Studio 7.0.